hello to us. Go ahead and share the video out. We will be starting in about 1 minute. 1 minute, we will be getting started. For the entire month of April, we are talking about parents and healing. And if you missed last week, we talked about normalized dysfunction. I told Mr. Tara Sanders that I have my ink pen and my notebook because I'm going to try to see, because listen, he was sharing some great information and I was trying to just keep track. So tonight's topic is ill-equipped and unprepared. All right, I'm very much curious to and interested in where this is going to go, Mr. Tars. Listen, so I'm excited. I'm excited about it. Welcome. We are almost getting started. You all share the video out. If you are joining us, go ahead and say hello to us. Let us know who you are. Thank you so much for joining us for our Talk About It Tuesday. And listen, it is still my birthday month. So remember, the It Is With Me t-shirt is our giveaway prize that you can get. And all you have to do to get your name in that drawing is just share out our YouTube page, tag 2 people in it, and then also tag Light It Up TV so that we'll know we can give you credit for it, okay? And your name will be entered each time you do so. Your name will be entered that many times inside of our drawing. All right, it is now 7:03. And oh my goodness, we have again with us our licensed professional counselor, Mr. Tara Sanders, who's here with us today. And oh my goodness, thank you so much, Mr. Tara. Thank you so much
for having me. Thank you.
Yes. All right, thank you, Rhonda. How are you doing, Miss Rhonda? All right, so listen, you all, I always like to tell everyone that our mission of Light It Up TV is to give children a voice and to teach them how to use their voices to impact their families, their schools, and their communities, to use their voices in a positive way to impact their families, their schools, and their communities. So thank you so much. I always say, hi, Charlene. I always say that Talk About It Tuesday is not just for the ones with kindergarten through 5th grade children. It is for anyone who's in the lives of these children, whether we are grandparents, aunties, uncles, godparents, teachers, counselors, whoever you are. Hi, Henrietta. Whoever you are, this is that time that we want to have some real raw discussion. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We've been talking about parents and healing. I just want to remind us that when you come on, if you're just joining us, that is our topic, parents and healing. Say hello so I can see you. And if you have any questions from last week, if you were on, go ahead and drop that in there while I'm doing our little introduction. Please go ahead and share this discussion with someone. If you're just joining us, go ahead and share it out real quick for me. If you have any questions that's just been burning on your mind in regards to the topic of parents and healing, go ahead and put it in the comments, okay? Any topic. If you have something that was regarding last week's discussion, go ahead and put that question in there as well. All right, so tonight's topic is ill-equipped and unprepared. So, Mr. Taurus, before you tell us a little bit about what that is and how that relates to parents and healing, I did have several calls, I want to say, this week in regards to let you know that the Lord is definitely using the platform to impact, because I had individuals to call and say how the topic and the discussion on last week, talking about normalized dysfunction, had them to think a lot about their childhood, a lot about some things in their past. And but there was one person that had a question, and I want to start off with their question as we lead into tonight's discussion. And that question they wanted to know is, when we're talking about normalized dysfunction, what scale is that on? Who determines what dysfunction is? How is that I guess graded, or who determines that this is dysfunction? So that's what I want to start off with on this evening to answer their question.
Well, I think that's a great question. And the evaluation of that is really the person and or the people involved directly in those relationships. Like I mentioned last week, the word normal is relative. It's not an indicator of good or bad. So
Mhm.
functionality is relative as well. And there's different areas that we use to evaluate levels of functioning, like we say mental, emotional, spiritual, occupational, social,
Mhm.
educational. So there's different things that we can look at to evaluate someone's level of functioning. And I think we all go through periods where we're not functioning, at 100%,
Mhm.
depending on what's happening in life.
Yeah.
But when we talk about in the early years as children are growing up in families, there's certain things um, that are acted out, or they're patterns and behaviors that really do feed into some unhealthy behaviors and
Mhm.
habits
Okay.
that could be or lead to dysfunctionality, whereas you're not living your best version of yourself. You're not living
Mhm.
and operating in a full capacity. I remember some years ago, um, Bishop Davis was talking, and um, he was talking about, form determines function. And
Mm.
a lot of our formation impacts our level of functionality. And so when you think about it, as kids, we're kind of molded, we're sculpted, you know, um, because we're impacted by so many different things
Mhm.
and so many different
Mhm.
people that will impact your level of functioning, because the way it's forming you, how it's framing you, how you're interpreting, those experiences, and how you're also looking at yourself in terms of those experiences. Are you having a
Mhm.
positive view of yourself? Are you having a negative or critical view of yourself?
Mhm.
And are you holding yourself to some unrealistic um, expectations and standards, to overcompensate, or
Mhm.
to outlive your past, so to speak.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so I like that you said that it's determined about with the people who are impacted by it.
correct,
And one of the
correct.
things I did share with her, I wasn't able to give her. I said, now I don't know if this is the correct answer, but I did share with her in my mind when she asked the question. I thought about if when there's a situation that is unhealthy, because we're talking about parents and healing as it relates to kindergarten through fifth grade children.
Sure.
And whenever we see a child in that age range that is dealing with emotional trauma or dealing with some type of unhealthy behaviors that appears to be as a result of what's going on with parents, then to me that's a dysfunction, because as parents our goal is not our goal is to try to help our children to be healthy. If you're just joining us, we're talking tonight about ill-equipped, unprepared parents and healing. Hi, James. Thank you for joining us. Hi, uh, Crystal. Thank you for joining us. You all, if you are joining us, we're talking about parents and healing, and we were just talking about who determines what dysfunction is. So last week, Mr. Torres, thank you for sharing that. And if you
Absolutely.
have any questions, go ahead and put your questions in as we're talking about things. I have some questions for you all as well. But you said last week, and I'm looking at my notes, you said that healing was available. And if it is available, but then you talked about unseen wounds. And I want
Hmm.
you to, as you're talking about being ill prepared, ill equipped, and unprepared, the question is if there's a parent that has an unseen wound, right? Because you said that sometimes when things happen that we as parents, we have unseen wounds and we're bleeding over people and we don't even know that we have the wound. It's a difference when you know that you have the wound. But how can a parent get healing if they don't know that they have it? Okay. And then the next question is because, and I say that because the ones of us in the community, whether it be school, whether it be work on the workplace, or even families, we all have the person that everyone can look at and say, like, this is
Somebody.
there's right that
Yeah,
there's something that's going on that we can say, quote unquote, there's a dysfunction there, right? And a lot
sure.
of times, what I have seen now, and it's just me, and you all tell me in the chat, it's just not talked about. It might be the one cousin, the one auntie, the one uncle. Oh, woo, Bilbo, you better stop. At church, right? Yes, that's what she said, right? Workplace, school, church, there's a dysfunction and everyone sees it, but sometimes it's not talked about. So that person may not be aware that they even have a wound. How do we, first of all, do we go and approach it? Because we're talking about not just that they have a wound, but the wound is affecting their kindergarten through fifth grade child.
Sure.
How do we approach that? Do we approach it? How do we approach it? And you all in the chat, I want, as you were thinking about that question, Mr. Taurus, I know I gave you a very complex question, but you all in the chat, you tell me, should we address it? Do you feel that we should address it? And if so, how? That's what I want to know from you all. If there's someone, whether it's our family, whether it's a coworker, whether it's church, when we see someone that it's affecting the kindergarten through fifth grade child, should we address it? And we clearly can see that. Should we address it? I want to hear from you all. What should we address it? And if so, how should we address it? Mr. Taurus, oh, go ahead. I'm gonna let you answer because then I have. All right, Crystal said at times it should. Okay. Anybody else? Crystal said at times it should. And then how do we go by anybody else? I want to hear from you all because this is our discussion. All right, Mr. Taurus, as they are thinking and they're putting their answers in the chat, go ahead and address that big question I had for you. That they have the unseen wound. They don't know they have it, right? We see it in our community, whatever aspect of our community. Should we address it and how?
So it's not necessarily we see the wound, we see the fruit of it. We see what's really being produced from it. And that's what we really can identify as the saying if that's really healthy. And I think, when addressing things that we see, clearly we see, and are pretty evident, we have to use a lot of discernment and wisdom when it comes to approaching situations like that. I can't tell you how many people I've met that have struggled for so long, and they have kind of resolved themselves that they're just damaged and they're just broken, and that's just how they're going to live the rest of their life to one degree or another. And there's a saying like, that's just how that person is. You've heard that before, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, that's how they became. That's not necessarily how they are. And I think a lot of times we feel like because we've become or something has persisted for so long, there is no changing. There is nothing to really do to repair it, to restore it, to heal it. And sometimes it's not necessarily that it's not seen. It's just people just kind of giving up. There's nothing I can really do about it. I can't fix that. That's unfixable. That's the impossible, And so when you talk about approaching people, like you just have to have great discernment. And if you don't, then don't don't approach. Because even the approach is really kind of the catalyst to what could, lead up to whatever the change may be. And sometimes people need to be seen, not as the problem, but because of a problem or something has happened to them. So like with a lot of kids, um, when they come in, what's really the focus is their behaviors. And
Yeah.
so what I do is like, hey, I'm not thinking about your behaviors. You're not your behavior. Let me get to know you and let's see
Mhm.
why these behaviors are happening. And I think it's
Absolutely.
really no different with adults. Like, let's see them for who they are and see why these things are manifesting, why they're being produced, why this fruit is showing up the way it is, and why it's causing problems the way it is. Um, so it's not necessarily one answer fits every situation.
Mhm.
Um, but I think to some degree, if it really moves you enough, like it kind of grieves your compassion or it kind of, mourns you, like, yeah, maybe you can say something, but think
Mhm.
about how you approach that conversation, how you approach
Mhm.
that person, because that will be usually the thing of how they're going to respond. Are they
Mhm.
receptive? Are they going to be
Mhm.
defensive? Or they're just gonna like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Because we're seeing it's not just like we were talking about just them and the dysfunction or the unhealthiness or the like you said, we see the fruit of what's going on, but then it's the cycle of them with the child. Like that is the
Right.
aspect, right, that we're looking at because we see the effects of what's happening with the child. So I see some people in the comments. I want to go back really quick. And then Mr. Taras, I want you to talk about how does this relate to being ill-equipped and unprepared, right? With
Sure.
that. Does that okay, so I see. All right, Crystal said at times it should, and then Latoya said I agree it should be addressed. Sometimes it may be hard to be addressed when you are not heard. Mm,
Absolutely. And so
mm.
I think that's a good uh, segue to respond to your
Okay,
immediate question.
okay.
You know, one of the things that kids learn from parents, first and foremost, is problem solving.
Mm,
They learn and watch how their parents, identify a problem and then respond to said problem.
mhm,
And sometimes kids learn how not to respond to
right.
problems that are very obvious
Mhm,
and
mhm,
they're really causing some issues in the family. And so, we see it like a lot with addictions, using those
yeah,
behaviors as a way to escape from, stress and those
mhm,
feelings. We see it a lot with other type um, of behaviors like overworking or um, just not really being engaged and
mhm,
just kind of in a sense of denial or just like ignoring it altogether.
yeah,
So that's one of the things that kids learn, and they don't develop a sense of confidence to and boldness to approach problems, even though they may say, "Yeah, that's a problem," but I just don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how to,
mhm,
approach it. I don't know how to respond to it. And so, even when kids do voice something, that doesn't necessarily mean that the parent is equipped and or prepared
oh,
to respond and approach the problem because it's a lot of learned behavior. So maybe
yeah,
they didn't learn. Maybe they had a parent that didn't necessarily respond to issues or you know
mhm,
um, appropriately respond to problems, and
mhm,
so they're just kind of repeating like, oh, let me just ignore it, it'll go away.
mhm,
And so sometimes it's just people just don't know how because they really weren't prepared.
yeah,
And when we talk about the ill-equipped, you know, I didn't say unequipped, I said ill-equipped. Like
mhm,
we are usually most of the time able. What we struggle with is our willingness.
wow, wow,
So ability is usually not the problem. We got our hands, we got our
mhm,
feet, we have our mouth, we have our ears, we
mhm,
have our brain. So it's really about how confident or how fearful I am to even begin to confront this thing because it already in my mind may be struggling with I'm going to make it worse, I'm going to fail,
mhm.
and or maybe no one else will notice it. You know what I mean? And
Would
so
you
you
do you think
you
that
hide.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm just
No, go ahead.
I
No,
just want to say, do you think that there are some people that actually I see the comments. You all the comments are, and I thank you all because this is a really good discussion. Um oh my goodness, am I frozen? Mm.
you still have audio.
Oh, I do. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Charles. I didn't know if I still had audio now. So ooh, what happened? All right. Am I back?
It still looks frozen, but we can still hear
Okay.
you.
All right, it just went out. Okay. So what one of the things that I wanted to say is, do you really think that there are people that like they're clueless, like they really don't know because it's been their normal? Because I know you're talking about the individuals, like as if they know, but do you think that there are individuals that really just don't know? Do you really think that they're like they are like they really don't know that this is a problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll give you a very common, I'll
Mhm,
give you a common proof of that. So, like, if I get a person in and,
mhm,
they were encouraged to come by, like their wife or their
mhm,
girlfriend or, somebody close to them.
mhm.
And, we'll be talking and we'll just kind of be going through some of the stuff. And I'll say something and they say, oh, my wife said the exact same thing. And so, they'll go home and they'll talk to their significant other, and they'll say, yeah, my counselor said this and this and this. And sometimes, in their descriptions of like their significant other's response, they look like, well, I
Mhm.
said the same to you. Like, what make it different that he said it, you know so
Uh-huh.
so
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
sometimes it's also about the source of it. And the reason why that's significant is
Mhm.
because these people don't have any emotional connection to me. Like, we don't have any emotional history.
Right.
So I'm not biased. They're not usually biased towards me. So
Mhm.
they hear me at a very neutral level. So they're more receptive to hearing what I'm saying, even if it's something that's already been said. And I think that's why I said earlier, like, we have to use the like discernment and wisdom, because sometimes we can say, you know, the right things or the very healthy things,
Mhm, mhm.
but because of the emotional foundation of it, it just may not be received because of shame, guilt, embarrassment, sometimes feeling
Right,
guilt,
right.
insulted. It's just a matter of how the person already feels, you know, in the relationship. And then
Mhm.
also on top of that, talking about or resolving a difficult topic or difficult issue.
Okay, so that you're saying that I want to make sure as a recap that, and I want to go over to the comments that there are is definitely like you just said is the source where it's coming from, and it could very well be that that person is definitely clueless to it, but it just is different coming from somebody else that may not be so personal connected to it. Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, all right. So I want to thank you, thank you. Hold on. I want to read some of the comments, Mr. Taurus, and then maybe you can respond. So someone's Crystal. Okay, she said it took my young son to make me see things with myself that he pointed out. Okay. Crystal, that is really good. I think that is great that your young son was able to get you to see some things. Unfortunately, right, there are a lot of parents that just overlook. They just overlook where whatever's going on. Mr. Tars, what
Right.
what would you say about that?
Well, I think it can be very uncomfortable and maybe embarrassing for your child to
Mhm,
point out
mhm,
any of your flaws, right?
mhm,
And I think also it's a great life teaching moment
mhm.
to where you say, hey, mommy or daddy were not perfect. And, you know, thank you for um, let me know that you saw or that you noticed this,
Mhm.
and I'm sorry if it hurt you or if it upsetted you or whatever the feeling or emotions are attached to it, and then say, I'm gonna try to do better. Like I'm gonna try to work on that. If depending on what the issue, I'm just speaking generally here.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
I
mhm.
think
Right.
that humility part is something that as a parent we can admit. And I'm gonna just be honest. Like there's times where I I struggle with that. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost like it was definitely for me to admit that I was incorrect or I was
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's pride. Um,
Katrina just said it, yeah.
and
Mhm.
and it's like especially as a dad, like you want to have a certain image, you want to have a
That's so
certain
good you're
level
sharing
of
that.
honor,
Mhm.
and but at the same time, I missed a very valuable moment for them to see, like, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay for me to be human. It's okay for
Mhm,
me to
mhm,
to 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 fall short or whatever the case may be,
mhm.
and learn how not to beat myself up and really be
Yeah.
okay with seeing my flaw,
Uh-huh.
because I want them to be able to see their flaw,
Yeah.
not get in despair, not get distressed with it, and be able to,
Mhm.
okay, I made a mistake. Let's keep it moving, right?
Yeah, I can
So,
correct it and keep moving. Yeah.
right. And so even the greatest of parents still struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I just know, like for me, that was a big thing for me because uh I just the way I kind of grew up, I just had really high expectations. My standards were very high,
Yeah,
even like
yeah.
more so for myself than anybody
Right,
else.
right.
But so when somebody called something out, it was just hard for me to see that because like, how did I miss that? How did I
Mm.
overlook that? Because I
Yeah.
overthink things, I overdo things, like
Huh?
so like for something to get by me, like okay, I must be slipping or something. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just kind of that we don't see ourselves because we're so consumed with ourselves.
Yeah, that's so good. That's thank you. Who was that? Is that Crystal? Thank you so much for bringing that out. I really appreciate that. Latoya says, and repeating dysfunction becomes an excuse for some to remain the same. Repeating dysfunction. So basically, that's saying that, well, it's hard for me to change. It's hard because of the
Absolutely.
fact that this is how I've always seen it, and rather than putting the work in, because I think you said more so that that healing is painful, right? It
Oh,
can
the
be.
process is.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
no, it
process.
is.
Yeah, it is. The
It
process
is.
is painful, and so being able and willing to go through that, I think, like Latoya say, they either they're going to go through it or they may make that excuse. Okay. Latoya also said Libby, she does that. Okay. To Libby actually does that to you when they talk about things. Katrina says sometimes parental pride keeps one ill equipped and unprepared to steer children on a different path when confronted
Absolutely.
with our past. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Katrina, for sharing that. And then we have to learn the imperfect part of parenting and humble ourselves to apologize. Yeah, and that can be definitely challenging. That can
Absolutely.
be challenging. All right. So
Absolutely.
our next question we have, Mr. Taurus. So we talked about the person that um, has the unseen wound and they don't know. What about whenever now this person knows, they've realized it, they are aware, this parent is aware, oh my gosh, I have been bleeding on my child. I have passed some things, to my child, that from things that happened to me. How can they go about getting healing? What does that process for to healing look like for them?
So,
What can they
first and foremost, we have to say first, like,
Mhm,
this isn't intentional usually.
mhm.
This is out of a very genuine and well-meaning place that a lot of this stuff happens.
Mhm.
And even with our best intentions, sometimes we still miss the mark, right? And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of people need to understand that, like, you don't intentionally set out to harm or to hurt or, to cause any sort of long-term problems or future problems
Yeah.
for your kids.
Mhm.
However, there's a likelihood that something will happen along the way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think sometimes it's just like realizing, like, okay, I don't need to really dig deep into the guilt of
Mhm.
what I did and how it caused whatever it
Mhm.
caused, and say, I think, you know, I thank God that I have an opportunity to try to make this right, to try to
Mm.
repair this, to try to
Perspective.
restore this, to try to,
Mhm.
change the generational. We call it generational curse, but I call it generational behaviors. And so,
Mm,
the
mhm.
behavior has to change at one point in the generational bloodline, right? So that's the change that can happen. Maybe it
Yeah.
didn't happen with your mom, maybe it didn't happen with, your grandmother, whoever. So it can happen with you. And so a lot of times it's not just about ourselves, it's also about what's following us and how it's
Mhm.
also going to play out, generations removed from us.
Right.
And so seeking help,
Mhm.
this is the part where we struggle, especially in church is, we come to the altar or we go to the minister, the pastor, we get prayer, or we talk about it, and then we try to do right. We read our Bible, we read books
Mhm.
or whatever,
Mhm.
but we really never get to the core issues and explore and process these things
Yeah.
as to, like, what is the root of this? Like, what is really, where did this
Yeah.
originate from?
Right.
And what else has this caused besides what I've already identified? You know what I
Right.
mean? There
Uh-huh.
could be some other
Uh-huh.
things that's going on that's just as, significant, but sometimes we focus on, oh, this is the big thing or this is the huge thing. But no,
Uh-huh.
there's some a lot of little things add up too. So I think, the seeking the counseling, especially someone that's, like me, I'm a clinical counselor, but I also see things through a biblical lens. And
Yeah.
so I incorporate both, even with the clients that aren't necessarily, religious.
Mhm.
The way I'm delivering it, they're gonna get some.
Uh-huh.
So so I think, making sure that you have somebody that's neutral, that can really help you see yourself, not to shame, not to judge, but to say, okay, now that we see, now that we know, now that we hear, what do you want to do about that?
Yeah.
Because remember, it's not the ability, it's the willingness now. Like, so what
Mm.
do you want to do with that?
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
you know?
So I'm so glad you said that because when you're talking about, there's such a stigma. We all know that, especially in our community. There's
Sure.
such a stigma with against counseling, and a lot of times I've heard people. I don't know. You all tell me in the chat. Have you heard anyone that said, "No, I'm not going to counseling. I'm gonna pray about it." And we want you to, like, we all need to pray about it, right? Like that's not what we're saying. Let me know in the chat. Stephanie said not the ability but the willingness. That's good. Yes. Crystal, I go to counseling and I now have my children go. The parenting class opened up a lot for us as a family. Very good. Yes. Anyone else, yeah, anyone else that has heard, yes, I'm going to pray about it. I'm gonna pray about it. I'm not going to counseling. Well, what would you say to that person? Okay, in the audience, I'm asking you all, but what would you say? Because I'm going to ask Mr. Torres, what if a person tells us that, what do we need to say? Right? Um, what do you all feel that response should be? If you see and we see, I see all the yeses, Michelle, Katrina, Henrietta, yes. What listen, Ebony Hall said, go lay on the chair. Go lay. That's the response. Go lay on the chair.
Right.
Y'all, you all, what should the response be? That's Ebony's response. I think is it Ebony? Uh, what should the response be? If that, then that was the question. What would you say to the person that says, I'm going to pray about it? And Taurus, Mr. Taurus, I want to say this. I think I spoke about my issues with my dad on here. And as you were saying about going to the altar and praying about it, and I can't tell you how many times I did that. And yes, I do believe that there was some type of healing that the Lord did, but there was still some missing pieces. I do believe that I felt that there was some healing that took place, but there
Yes.
was still some missing pieces.
Yes.
And I didn't know that there were missing pieces.
Right.
I was not aware that there were missing pieces, but I was aware of, as you're talking now, like, you know what? I still left there. And 2 weeks later, I still felt that pain, right? And when you
Yes.
were talking about sometimes um like things bleed on our children, like we don't do it as a parent. I remember talking about it on one of the other episodes where I try my best for my children to not see how I felt about the situation with my dad, because I didn't talk about, I didn't tell them, because I didn't want them
Mm.
to have the feelings that I felt, right?
Right.
But they picked up on my emotions.
Of course.
They picked up on, on my mannerisms, my behaviors. And so, and I told you now that my son still deals with that because he saw um how things he just saw the situation. And as
Sure.
for him
Sure.
seeing the situation, seeing my emotions, seeing about it, he's unable to um or doesn't, or I won't say he's unable. He doesn't, he's saying chooses not to, right? Because you talk about
Right.
that willing and ability, like he doesn't at this time. He's making a choice. And
Right.
so I just believe that is great that we're bringing on here now that uh prayer is good. Like God is number one, right?
Hmm.
But there's some other places practical. Then I ask you that. That was the question I asked you when we very first talked. Like, are there practical things that have to be done to get to healing? And you said yes. So I just wanted to share that. I remember. I just remember going to the
Right.
altar, and I remember feeling really good. And I know that there was something that took place, some type of spiritual healing. But then 2 weeks later, I remember, like, maybe if there was something that occurred with my dad, I just felt that pain, right? The pain
Right.
was still there. And I guess it showed up, right? Even when I didn't was trying for it not to. So Christina said, please go lay on the chair. Latoya said, prayer without works is dead. Now, Latoya, you just opened up something. I want Christina to put in the chat what she said. Christina shared something that was so profound with me as we were talking about this week. Christina, if you can put that in the chat, would be really, really great. But it's going along the lines of prayer without works is dead. So the question is, what would you say to somebody that says, I'm just going to pray about it? And we're wrapping up. We are wrapping up in about the next 5 minutes, you all. We're wrapping up. Okay. Katrina said, oh, healing is a process. Yeah, it's a process. It's not a one-time. Thank you. It's not a one-time thing. Yeah.
Right.
James,
Right.
the Holy Spirit will lead you in all truth, even within ourselves. Yes. And that's the scary part. Like when he opens it up and you get to see yourself. And some people turn and run away from it, right?
Right.
Because they're like, see, like this is, like you said, Taurus, this is me. Like,
Right.
is this really, is this me? What was the last comment, Christina? I didn't see that one. You can't heal what you won't reveal. Wow. That is so true.
So I want to thank you for sharing that, that
Mhm.
personal story. And the reason that, so I want to respond to two things.
Uh-huh.
So you had a incomplete experience.
Wow.
So when you went to the altar, you prayed, that was just one element. But when you went through the original experience, the painful experience, it was multiple elements. There's multiple
Wow.
layers to that experience. And so
Wow.
that's why it's just not about praying or just not about, doing the spiritual things because hey, you were affected mentally, you're affected
Mm,
emotionally, you're affected
mhm,
psychologically, and
mhm.
sometimes unfortunately physically. So
Yeah.
like you're just having a very limited experience to something that was
Wow.
like majorly in
Mm.
experience, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so the other thing that you mentioned was you were trying not to project or express what those uncomfortable
Mhm.
feelings you were feeling. And what I've learned is, even personally, is what we focus on magnifies. And a lot of
Wow.
times people focus on what they don't want to happen
Good.
and it ends up happening rather than focusing on what they want to happen. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
That's
So
great.
really, you're causing it to happen whether you realize or not, and you're not even trying to, but
That
really
is
you are feeding it. You're feeding into it.
wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
how else is he not going to see it? Because you're really kind of you're giving it life. You're feeding it. You're fueling
Yeah.
it.
So what would have been the opposite? What would have been the opposite?
You
That
say, hey, mommy's feeling some kind of way right now, but
mhm.
she gonna get it. She gonna get it together. She gonna come back. She gonna get her smile back. Like obviously he noticed something, so you might
Right.
as well say, hey, whatever you notice it, and mommy's got notice it too, and mommy's trying to do something about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good. That's
Because
good.
you don't want your child to make your feelings, your emotions, their responsibility.
Right. Right. And I believe that that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially a son from mother.
Yeah, because now he's
Especially a
24,
son from
right?
mother. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I've been trying. So my last question, and now we're gonna close out, is how do you, and that was, oh my gosh, that was a question. I didn't plan to share that, but that was a question on there, is how do we go back? How can parents go back and repair the damage that has been done? Whether knowingly, unknowingly. Like how do we go back and repair the damage? How can someone go back and repair the damage?
Well, I think it depends on the situation and not and sometimes it's not necessarily the window of opportunity is passed, the door is closed. Um, even when there's like a recognition within a family unit that so much has happened and no one has really talked about it. It hasn't really been exposed or just talked about. And then people are ready to talk about it. And people are at different places in their healing or different places with
Mm,
it. And so you have some people like they can talk about it and they're not going to be like irrational out of control. And you got some people like, no, they're gonna show out. They're gonna they're gonna be the disruption
yeah.
to the issue. So
Mhm,
it just depends on where the people involved are
mhm.
and are they really ready to have the conversation? Are they
Mm,
really ready to be a part of the reconciliation if that's
yeah.
necessary?
Mhm.
And unfortunately, no one wants to have a painful conversation with somebody that they also have lived to be vulnerable with.
Wow.
So that's already kind of a thing against the conversation. Like,
Mhm,
I've lived with you for years and I feel this way or I've been, made to feel this way because of whatever's happened. So
mhm.
there's two layers of, obstacles with that. And so like it's not an easy process.
Yeah,
Nor I don't think anyone really makes it out to be that way or
yeah.
says it is.
Mhm,
But it's a necessary process. It's
mhm.
a necessary process.
That's good.
Because there's some part of you that is not functioning at your best
Mhm,
when you have unresolved issues and
mhm.
unresolved relationships.
Yeah.
That's in your immediate circle, especially.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good. Listen, thank you, Mr. Taurus. I want to, as we are closing, I want to read these comments. Okay, Katrina said, faith without works is dead. Don't just pray. Choose not to be a repeat offender with your children or grandchildren. Yes, 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 yes. Mama Yolanda, so true. Michelle Grimes says, where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. The multitude, that's right. There's more than one counsel. There's more than one element. Very good. Thank you for adding scripture to that, Michelle. Go to a Christian counselor and get the practical steps or ways of healing. That just confirmed what you were saying. She just put the scripture with it that there are multiple elements that we get that healing from. Latoya, having those honest conversations. Yes, which can be, challenging, as he said, if depending on if the party's ready to have it. Acknowledging it, the hurt that has been given. Yeah. And Ebony Hall, as Ebony, I find in healing, you may want answers of why did it happen, and you may not get the answer. You may never get the answers because the other person thinks because they're healed, you should be. Woo! Wow. That's true. Taurus, I remember you told me something this week that you said none of us should depend on anybody else for our healing. That our healing is our own responsibility. That's Absolutely. What that reminded me of. Let's see, going down. Okay, Christina, here it is, y'all. On this note, we are leaving. Lou says, as parents, we take ownership of our part in our children's negative experiences. Pray not to repeat. All right, you all will leave it on this note right here. Listen to this. The question is, when we're talking about what should you say to somebody that says, I'm just going to pray about it? She said, I shared from a conversation I had with a friend why it's important to also do the work and not just say you're going to pray about it. She posed the question, what if Jesus never actually went and did the work? What if he never went to the cross and just kept praying in the garden? The work has to be done along with the prayer. It takes both to be complete. Listen, when she said that to me, she said, what if Jesus said that he was just going to pray about it and not do the work? So listen, you all, as we are closing, put in the chat, look, do the work, because if Jesus did the work, we have to do the work too. It's not just, he could have just said, well, I'm just going to pray about it. I'm going to let them, it'll be okay. No, he had to do the work to go to the cross, right? You all put in the chat as we are closing. Mr. Taurus, I don't know if you have any last words that you want to say. Do the work. You all put in the chat as we're closing out. Do the work. Do the work. Let's see. Put it in there. Do the work. Put in the work. That's right. Put it in the chat, everyone. Mr. Taurus, any last words?
So, I think about the very common story, the woman with the issue, that she pressed her way despite her infirmity for many, many years. And a lot of times we don't press. We let our infirmity, cripple us, paralyze us, or just get us so down that it's like we quit, we give up. So like, it's the pressing. We still got to press the work. Yes. We still got to press. We still got to push forward.
Press. Ooh, press. We still got to press. Do the work. That's it. You all, thank you so much. Listen, if you all enjoyed it, share it with someone. Leave us a comment letting us know what you all enjoyed. What's the key thing that you took away from it? And don't forget about my birthday giveaway. All right. The It Is With Me, I think it's fitting for that. It is, we're not going to repeat the cycles. It Is With Me shirt. You all you have to do is share our YouTube channel, tag 2 people, and tag Light It Up TV. That's it. Thank you so much. Do the work. All right. Until next time, remember to light it up.
Have a good night.
Good night.